This is the man responsible for perhaps the largest bombing in Southern California history. A car bomb, the FBI says, was meant for a fertility clinic that sent debris flying for blocks, injuring several people and killing the suspect. But we're learning that this 25-year-old has twisted views about life and a passion for death. And his dad reportedly claims the bomber burned down the family home when he was 9 years old. So we have a lot to unpack. We're on the case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Stewart. It is shocking that a bomber in Southern California didn't kill anyone else but himself. The blast went off on Saturday at an address that is home to several medical facilities in Palm Springs, California, including the American Reproductive Centers fertility clinic, and the FBI says that was the target of a car bomb. Here's a picture that the center posted on its Facebook page, and you can see the damage right there on your screen. Now, this is the only person who police say was killed in that bombing, and that was the person who was behind it, 25-year-old Guy Edward Bartkus. The FBI says he was driving a silver sedan with explosives inside, and the bomb went off in the medical facility's parking lot. The FBI says the bomber left online writings and a manifesto, and they're going through that right now. Here's what they said at a news conference. This video per Fox News.
The subject had nihilistic ideations, and this was a targeted attack against the IVF facility. Make no mistake, we are treating this, as I said yesterday, as an intentional act of terrorism.
By definition, nihilistic means rejecting all religious and moral principles in the belief that life is meaningless. Plain and simple. This is not someone who valued human life at all, according to the FBI, and they wanted to take out a place that tries to bring life into this world in an IVF facility. Now, we found a website by someone who claims to be the bomber of the IVF center in Palm Springs that was up in the hours after the bombing. At this point, that website is no longer live, but it did have posts by someone, really run-on posts, about something called pro-mortalism. Now, I'm not going to share a lot of what the website had to say, but it does have this post saying that the end goal is, quote, for the truth to win, and once it does, we can finally begin the process of sterilizing this planet of the disease of life. So it gives you a bit of an idea, allegedly, of what was going on in this bomber's mind. Now, at the top of the website, there's also a link that says people can watch a live stream of the bombing, and he says it was his intent not to survive the bombing. Now, the FBI says it does appear that the suspect was trying to stream this attack, but he failed. Here's more of what investigators said per Fox News.
Are you aware of a possible manifesto at the investigation?
I am.
For next week?
We are looking through that. We are tracking a possible manifesto out there, and it's part of our ongoing investigation.
And was this explosion being live streamed?
We believe he was attempting to live stream it, and yes, that is also part of our investigation.
Before we get back to this story, I want to bring you a Law&Crime legal alert. Did you know that children are being diagnosed with serious conditions like type 2 diabetes and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and research is potentially linking ultra-processed foods to these outcomes? Our partners at Morgan & Morgan are stepping in the fight to hold food companies accountable. They have decades of experience fighting large corporations, and they're ready to stand up for families who deserve justice. So if your child under 21 has been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes or non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, go to www.forthepeople.com/food. You can also scan this QR code on your screen to learn more. The FBI made sure to note that the bomber was the only one who died in this blast. There were 4 other people who were injured, but right now they're all out of the hospital. And perhaps the most important in all of this, all the embryos at that clinic were saved. That was a key target of the bomber. None of them were damaged, so a total failure by the 25-year-old attacker. The FBI was also asked about an audio recording that was posted on the website and whether they could confirm it was by the bomber, and they said that is part of their ongoing investigation. The FBI is continuing its investigation in Palm Springs, gathering as much evidence as they can, but there was also an investigation going on at where they believe this bomber lived, which was more than an hour's drive away. Take a look at this map from Google. You can see 29 Palms, California. That's the community they believe this bomber drove from. The FBI executed a search warrant at a residence there. Now, it's unclear what evidence they were able to find or took from the home, but they say there is no longer a threat to those who live around the address. They did have to evacuate some people who lived nearby as a precaution. For as bizarre and twisted as that website, allegedly, the website of the bomber was, the bomber's father gave interviews to local media in Southern California, and in some ways it paints an even more bizarre and twisted picture of this person who's accused of trying to blow up an IVF facility. Richard Bartkus, who was the bomber's father, spoke to KTLA, and he said on one hand, his son had a, quote, good heart. On the other hand, he said his son burned down the family house when he was 9 years old. He said his son liked to play with matches, and he became obsessed with making smoke bombs, and that led to him burning their house down. The dad also says that he and the bomber's mom became divorced a decade ago, and that he hasn't really seen his son in some time. He also said that his son stayed with his mom after the divorce because he was too strict and his ex-wife was more lenient. He also thinks that his son was brainwashed. His words. Now, another disturbing twist in this story may be a connection to a murder that recently happened in another state, according to the Daily Mail. Now, a line that we saw on the bomber's alleged website talked about someone he said was a friend of his named Sophie, and that she recently got the guy that she was living with to shoot her, and he said that had a profound impact on him to the point where he wanted to carry out this attack. The Daily Mail draws a connection to a recent alleged murder of a girl named Sophie Tinney, which happened on April 20th in Washington State. Now, this is her death on the official website of Pierce County, Washington. You can see the authorities say that she was shot multiple times in what is considered a homicide. On the website, the bomber says that Sophie convinced a person that she was living with to shoot her. Then we looked at this local news article from Washington State, the News Tribune, and prosecutors recognized that as a theory as to what happened in that case. Now, Tinney's boyfriend, Lars Nelson, is currently facing a murder charge in connection to her death, and we actually have part of the 911 call he made.
Okay, and what do you need help with?
A deceased person.
Now, that's the voice of Nelson making that call. The FBI has yet to officially and publicly connect the two cases or say whether the bomber of the fertility clinic had direct contact with the victim in that alleged murder, Sophie Tinney. It can't be understated just how large of an explosion this was in Palm Springs, and the fact that no one other than the bomber himself was killed in some ways could be seen as miraculous. The FBI says the explosion in Palm Springs is larger than a blast that happened in Orange County, California in 2018. And these are images from that 2018 explosion. A man named Stephen Beal bombed a day spa to kill his ex-girlfriend. He also killed 2 other people. Beal is currently serving life in prison with another 30 years for that attack. In the Palm Springs case, this investigation isn't over. The FBI says they are still trying to piece together a timeline of where the bomber was the entire day leading up to Saturday's attack. And they have a website up as a place where people can go and submit tips if they have that information. Joining us now to break down what we know at this point is retired FBI agent Colin Schmidt. Always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for being here. You worked in California, so you know the area where this happened really well. I want to start with this suspect. They say that he has a pro-mortalism is kind of the term they're using to describe the ideology he had. Nihilistic, I think, was the other term that they had. I mean, what stands out to you with what we know at this point about his background?
Well, his intense mental health issues. I mean, when you start talking about nihilism, basically nihilism is you're following a ideology that wants chaos and wants good people to be hurt. So it doesn't appear that this guy really had any purpose in life, and this was going to give him his purpose, which was basically to set off a car bomb and try to hurt a lot of people.
Yeah, I said nihilistic. Nihilism, that's right. That was the word that they used to describe him. Because on one hand, I was listening to what the FBI has been saying, and then you have these alleged writings that he had online, and it seems and so you could look at it and be like, wow, this is very different than some other people who have tried to do some things. But then at the same time, to your point, this is someone who just wanted to kill a lot of people and cause a lot of damage. When you're an investigator in this, how much do you look into the nuances of what political affiliation or whatever sort of motive they said they had, but then at the same time, just look at someone who wants to cause chaos?
Well, and when you have this much damage and this much of an explosion, the number one after investigation is to find out if there are other bombings or acts of violence planned, or does he have a handler? Is there a conspiracy? Was there other people involved in this? Because you need to absolutely get those people tied up as soon as possible, because if you don't, there may be more of these going on. And it sounds like he's completely alone, lone actor, lone wolf, and no handler that motivated him to do this.
He was 25 years old, and this was apparently a lot of firepower in this explosion that he had. What stands out to you at this point about what type of bomb he used to carry this out?
Well, I don't necessarily know what the ingredients he used. It's just the B-25 and be able to have a bomb of this magnitude that actually was effective and worked. It also gives me pause for the investigators to go look into how did he get this training? Who showed him how to do this? Was it just offline or off the internet, or did somebody actually train him on how to put all the ingredients together to make this car bomb?
In your experience, when it comes to people who use explosions, I know we don't know the specific ingredients, but are these items typically that you could buy offline and find directions to online somewhere to put together? I mean, would you have to be a bomb expert to build something like this?
Well, going back to the Oklahoma City bombing, that was basically fertilizer. That was fertilizer and diesel fuel with an igniter. And I wasn't a bomb technician. The FBI, in my biased opinion, has the greatest bomb technicians in the world, who are all working around the clock on this right now to determine exactly what happened. But to answer your question, yes, basically an explosion is a chemical reaction. So if you get the right chemicals together, then you're going to be able to, and an igniter, then you're going to be able to get the outcome that you want.
And for this suspect, they say he was the sole person that was killed. Presumably he was in the car when it went off, or near the car when it went off. Would the FBI be able to determine, would it really matter at this point, whether that bomb went off when he wanted it to, or if it was his intention the entire time to go out in this attack?
Well, the attitude of the FBI in cases like this specifically is no stone will be left unturned. So I had the privilege of working with a lot of the managers and the head of the LA field office, and they are fantastic investigators, and they will leave no stone unturned, and no question that could be asked be unanswered. So to answer your question, it may not appear to be important, but if that is an open question, they're going to find the answer.
When it comes to determining that it was him, they obviously have the car, but I assume that you're going to be able to get some DNA from what the scene looks like, and I'm sure that was a pretty gory scene to come upon after. I mean, how are you able to determine that it actually is him based off of, for lack of a better term, I guess, what's left after an explosion that was so big like this?
Well, the first step is the circumstantial evidence. It was his car. There's probably indicia of him being in the car, whether it be letters or something with his name on it. He might have a driver's license that was near the body parts that were recovered. And then the direct evidence, or the evidence that's actually going to, open and shut this case, would be his DNA. There's going to be plenty of blood evidence, unfortunately, to be graphic around. And they're going to be able to compare that because they know who his relatives are and get samples from them. Or if he's been arrested before for a felony, his DNA might already be in the system.
And the FBI is still looking for information. They have a website out for people to put in any sort of images they may have of the vehicle that he was driving on the morning of the attack. I think the last time they saw him was around 6 o'clock in the morning, and they're trying to piece together holes. Kind of going back to leaving no stone unturned, why is it important that you have the full timeline, even though in this case, the suspect is dead?
Well, it's very similar to the San Bernardino terrorist attack that I was working as a manager when I was working with, or helped set up the command post. Is the FBI was able to get the timeline and objectively identify every single second of their timeline 48 hours prior to them being the act and them being killed, with the exception of 15 minutes. So to answer your question, the reason for the timeline and being able to identify every single second of that timeline where he was is to ensure there wasn't any other actors, any other co-conspirators, or a handler that may have put him up to this.
The FBI mentioned that this explosion was larger than one that happened in Aliso Viejo, California, which is in Orange County, several years ago. That was a case where a man targeted his ex-girlfriend, ended up killing 2 others as well at a spa with an explosion. What do you remember, just being in California, remember about that blast? And what does it say about this blast that this was a larger one?
Well, I didn't work that case. I was on the job when it happened, and what I remember is basically the size of the blast radius on that one was large, but has nothing compared to the blast radius of this one. I was watching the assistant director for the LA division, Akil Davis. He said they were finding pieces or items that were associated with this bomb radius up to like 3 or 4 blocks away. So the Aliso Viejo bomb blast radius was much smaller than this issue or this case.
How much, knowing that? I mean, 4 people were injured. They're all out of the hospital. They're able to save all the embryos at this IVF facility as well. I mean, knowing how strong this bomb was, but it doesn't seem like, I mean, physically damage to the building for sure. But are you surprised that this ended up not being more damaging in terms of loss of life than what it could have been?
Absolutely. Number one, because Palm Springs can get very busy, especially that area of town. I worked down there for about 2.5 years. I also want to give a shout out to the FBI agent that was with the fire department and was able to go in and save the other embryos that were there by way of getting the electricity turned back on to ensure that those parents and patients are going to be able to have children in the future because of those embryos that were there. So the fact is that this is, I think we all, the citizenry and the people of Palm Springs dodged a bullet that this was not a bigger loss of life, because he attacked this place. But if he had put that car at a large gathering like a music event or a sporting event, it could have been hundreds of people could have been casualties.
Yeah, it's shocking, and certainly in a place where so many people go for vacation, like Palm Springs, that it wasn't something that was a lot worse. I think about, and though we don't know the specific ingredients that were used, if there are things like fertilizer that you can buy, and I know in some cases now, like Amazon, for example, that can be submitted as evidence in cases. What type of tracking can be done when it is somebody who's buying kind of household items in some way, but when you piece together that they're buying all these specific things, that it could be something dangerous? I mean, is there a way to track people who could be doing something like that?
Well, ammonium nitrate, I think, is now tracked in terms of how much is bought. I think you have to have a license for it based upon what happened in Oklahoma City, as well as the World Trade Center 1, the first attack there. So depending on what the ingredients are, some of the stuff is already tracked. You have to have a license for it or an identifiable purpose. But depending on what he had in there or who gave it to him, who knows? I mean, we just have to know what the ingredients are before we make that determination.
And then when it comes to, and I know that we've talked about other cases in the past that kind of involve people in this age group. They spend a lot of time on social media. They have extremist views. It seems like he fits the profile of some of the other cases that we've talked about. And I know you've worked in the past. I mean, what can the FBI do and other members of law enforcement to try to track these people down before something happens?
Well, the FBI and the American law enforcement have to be cognizant of personal liberties and be careful about becoming a agency of pre-crime and trying to anticipate these issues. But on the flip side, it all comes back to see something, say something. If he was online saying, spouting a violent ideology or saying things that he was showing his intent, if other people saw that, they needed to report it. And the social media companies do have filters that can pick up on that stuff, and they can also report that to the authorities.
One thing I noticed, there was a quote from his dad, who I guess had not really been in his life for a while since he divorced his mom, but he said that the suspect had a, quote, good heart, which, you know, based on what we're told happened, you know, that's up for certainly up for debate. But in your experience, when it comes to confronting parents about what's going on in their kids' lives, what they're doing on social media, how aware typically are parents that their kid may be looking at something or believing something that could put them in a position where they could harm a lot of people?
Well, I think in cases where there is a act of violence, the parents have no idea what they're doing. And I did see the interview of him by a local news station, and it just appears that he kind of had no idea what mental state his son had prior to the bombing.
What advice do you have for parents? And again, this was a case, I mean, he's 25 years old, he's an adult. It's not like he's living in his parents' house anymore, it seems, with you know, the family computer. But what can people do to try to identify folks that have these types of beliefs before something becomes deadly for others?
Well, I think the art of just a conversation, you know, that's been lost in society because of the advent of social media, is just sitting down and having a conversation with your children, even your adult children, to find out what their mental state is, to find out where they're at, to show some interest in them. Because I think parents would be amazed if they ask a few probing questions, open-ended questions with their children on what their children will end up saying to them.
I know they searched his house in 29 Palms, Colin. As far as in your experience, and I know it's speculative, we don't know what they found inside the house as of yet, but typically, though, a lot of the red flags that we know about were online. When you go into a home like that, where parents maybe had no idea what was going on, how common is it to find things that in hindsight, it's very clear could have been the red flag, that someone could have reached out and said that something was wrong?
Well, I think the key word is hindsight. Is number one, I think the parents become desensitized to the behavior of their own children because they don't want to believe that they have evil intent. The second thing is you see these items, they don't appear on their face as significant until a catastrophic event. For example, if he's got a lot of searches of explosives or something along those lines on his search history, with the outcome that we had, that would be significant, you know, to the investigation.
Yeah, there's a lot to dig through here, and though the suspect is dead, there's still a lot to try to piece together in the investigation. Retired FBI agent Colin Schmidt, thanks for joining us on Law and Crime. We always appreciate having your perspective.
You're welcome. Thank you.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. We hope you can subscribe to our content here on YouTube, and you can also find us on Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.